Okay, we've only got so much time to cover a lot of stuff, it seems like, and I need to talk really quickly, it seems like. So, after this isti'adha, which I hopefully covered a little bit of, maybe some more than just, it's something done before recitation of the Quran, is that we have the recitation. And of course, the ritual prayer, this is probably, if there are two aspects of the prayer which are significant, extremely significant, is the recitation of the words of God, and then the sajda, the prostration, which are also bound together within the Quranic text itself. So that's a bush that's burning, and I think it's an oak tree, but I'm not quite sure. But I thought it was an oak tree, and it's got a nice color job to it. And there's a reason I put the burning bush there. And the next picture, which is my own picture I drew myself. So don't excuse, I'm not Picasso. But I think it's not so bad. And he's just been pasted up there. Now it could be a fish. But if you can maybe figure out without the eyes there, we thought about having his head cut off, and we would have his head fall off, that little animation, but we decided not to do that. But we left him with his head. And of course, he's very Hanafi because he's got his hands below his navel, and you can see that right there. Really strict about that. And sort of got big hips. Androgynous type of human being. But the idea, and it's strange perhaps, but it is important in the symbolism, not my pictures, but what I want to say. And it's the idea of this musawi, this mosaic reality that we go through. Now, if you read some really classical, traditional books of tafsir, the qiyam, and I didn't really talk much about qiyam, the standing position, and I really could talk about that, but I'm not going to. But just standing upright position, and particularly standing as we bind our hands, in about the yaday, the binding of the two hands together, is significant. And many of our mufassirun, particularly in classical texts, which unfortunately, if you don't know Arabic, or if you don't know Urdu or Turkish or something like that, they may not be available. Because most of the stuff available in the market are really limited. Ibn Kathir's his tafsir, either as abridgment or to a degree of completeness. And that's maybe all you're exposed to, not very much at all. Maybe works by Sayyid Qutb or a little bit by Maududi. These are very contemporary, except Ibn Kathir is not contemporary. But, that genre of writers. And so, Alusi and other classical commentators you may not get from, unfortunately, because you don't have the language skills perhaps to access their texts. But the idea of binding the hands is really taken from this whole idea of what we're doing, and that's the idea of we are having qira'ah, recitation. Ooh, what's that doing? Like animation. And istima', and we are reading and we are attentively listening. And this is from Surah Al-Taha, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks to Musa alayhi salam, and فَلَمَّا أَتَاهَا نُودِيَ يَا Musa. And this idea of calling out, God calling out. God calls out to Moses to come. And of course we have a call too, it's called the adhan. It's a nida, it's a call. And of course we know that comes from the tradition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave there was a question in Medina about the call to how to bring people to worship, and various propositions were made, and bells, horns, emulating of the Jews and the Christians, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitated through dream that it was through the adhan that we have. And the adhan is a call of God. Hayya ala Salah, hayya ala falah, come to the ritual prayer, come to falah, come to that which is fruitful and abundant, which is giving, which is fecundant, successful, that's what it's translated, but falah is much more than just being successful. It's like some business deal with Allah, so to say, some terms. Inni ana rabbuka faq'an alayk. That's how you approach. Moses approaches the sacred space, right? Allah says, Innaka bil wadi muqaddas tuwa, and you're approaching the sacred space. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells Moses, you got to get into the space, and you're going to have to act a certain way, so take off your sandals. That's very important there. وَأَنَا اخْتَرْتُكَ, well, I have chosen you. You've been called, and فَاسْتَمِعْ لِمَا يُوحَى. And then Allah says, listen intently to what's being revealed, the revelation, the wahy. And so that's where I'm going to with that. Allah says, إِنِّنِي أَنَا اللَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا فَأَعْبُدْنِي وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِي. I am, the great I am. I am God. There is no deity but I. Worship me and establish ritual prayer that I be remembered. So that's the purpose then of the picture here. And the picture is that we Muslims have a Musawi quality to us, a Mosaic quality, a Moses quality to us. And that is, in my pictures here, which looks very sort of New Age-ish, but I suppose that's sort of funky hippie thing there. The flaming bush, But and what we want to do, we couldn't. We don't have the technology for that, apparently. But we want to superimpose these two pictures together. Because what the Muslim does is that and this is important, I think I have it here. Let me go through here. Istima. Hold on a second. The verse of the Quran. We'll get to Sakina in a minute. But you are a vessel of Allah. And there's a hadith I have there that Allah has vessels amongst the peoples of the earth. And the vessels of God are the hearts of His righteous servants. This is a Hasan hadith. So the idea of a vessel, being a vessel. And a receptacle, so to say. And when we get to this idea of sakina, we'll get to there. But you stand in recitation. You memorize words of God, divine speech, of course, in sounds and letters. And you become a vessel. And you also then you project them out. And you not only project them out, but you are to listen to them. So your qira'ah isn't like you have to actually move your lips. Your prayer's qira'ah is not valid unless you actually, you have to move the lips. If you don't move the lips as you're reading, it's not qira'ah. So you have to do this. And so you become, in a sense, in this process of becoming, in a sense, the bush where Moses hears from, symbolically. He's listening, he approaches it. He has to approach it a certain way. And so we approach it, we take off our shoes, traditionally. We take off our shoes in the prayer. And we stand before God. And we are humble. And so this is what the classical commentators say, this position of holding our hands or keeping our hands bound in some way is a Moses-like position, of Moses, like symbolically of like we are like Moses before the bush, and we are hearing divine speech. And we receive it, and we listen to it. So we have istima'. And istima', which is that word there used, is that this word used here is not just listening, it's attentive listening. And this is the word used in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith about the walking date palm. And when the Prophet has it, commands it to come to him through the agency of another person. And when the date palm comes to him, it said that the Prophet, he bent down and he spoke to the date palm and he listened intently he had an intent listening to the date palm. This is prophetic. Prophets listen intently. Prophet Muhammad says that when he spoke with you, he turned his face towards you. He didn't just like, hey, Assalamu alaikum, how are you doing, believers of God? He actually faced the believers of God. He gave them tawajjuh. He faced them. This is prophetic. And so this idea of istima' is listening intently. And so that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're to recite and be able to hear it yourself. Because you are a source. You have become the vessel of divine speech. You carry it within you. You're a hafid. You're a guardian of it. You're a means of which God guards it. He reveals it. He guards it. This is what the Quran says of itself. And so God reveals it. He guards it. And you then become a means that God uses to guard something of divine speech. And so the Prophet says, "Balligh anni wal ayat." Take from me the people, even an ayat. You're a carrier of this divine speech. And if you have little of it, then take it to someone else and share it. That's prophetic in itself. And so this is what we do as believers. And so that also has powerful symbolism for us. So I think the idea of us to think about, that's what I'm doing. I'm very Moses-like in my prayer. Okay, there's an Adamic relationship to the prayer. We sort of hinted about that because it comes from paradise, and it's a means to return back to paradise. There's an Adamic Adam relationship. It has a Moses quality to it, and of course, as we'll find out later on, it has an Abrahamic quality to it, a relationship with Abraham too. And so then this idea, which is much more Moses-like, is the idea of sakina. And we don't think about this a lot. And so Allah Ta'ala says, here I've got to go through this quickly, not much time. These verses in the Quran talking about, in the Hebrew, shakina, the sakina. Now I saw some translations of this, and I translate it without giving it, I think, the reflections that classical commentators give to this word sakina. And the idea that something is happening in recitation. So it is He who has sent down a sakina upon the hearts of the believers. Who will the anzala as-sakina fi qulubil mu'minin. And usually, this one translation was like, it makes the hearts tranquil. And it's missing the point. Again, something is being sent down. The Quran is called Tanzil. It's been sent down, right? And we have, Adam has his habut, his being sent down, cast down. And Muhammad has his uruj, his ascension up. We get water which is purifying, which is sent down by us, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We have this idea of this tanzil, this verb nazala, and its derivatives is used a lot with the Quran, with things of the Quran, with things of prayer. Things are coming from above to us. And one thing that comes from above is sakina. And the second one here, so these verses, we're thinking about like at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, in Allah, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. This is about the Bay'ah of Hudaybiyah, right? I thought the tree was important too. I think it's interesting. Trees in the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ, has a tree in paradise, Sidratul Muntaha. There's a tree that Adam and his wife are not to get near. They take a bay'ah, a pledge to the Prophet under the tree. The tree. Just the tree. Trees are significant in our religion. There's a lot of powerful symbolism there. But we don't want to talk about trees tonight. That's a class of, dendrology. That's fun, dendrology. It's a good class at that university. I loved it. I was in a forestry class, man. And I was walking around with these forest students in the forest. We were in the forest with my turban on and my white clothes. And they had John Deere hats on and cowboy boots, And I was this freaky guy with the turban on in the forest. It was weird. Smokey the Bear was really upset. But these hadith are important here. Ibn Ishaq report, I heard Al-Bara'a as saying that a man recited Al-Kahf, Surah Al-Kahf, when an animal was there in the house and it began to take fright. And as he looked around, he found a cloud overshadowing it. He mentioned that to the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu. Upon this, he sallallahu said, "Oh, so-and-so, recite on the surah." It means continue reciting it. As sakina, the sakina descends at the recitation of the Quran, or on the account of the Quran. And another longer narration. Wow, that's a long one. Yeah. But this one is, when the Quran is being recited, we see then, he saw something like a canopy over my head with what seemed to be lamps in it rising up in the sky till it disappeared. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentions that those lamps are the angels. This is happening to the companions. Reciting Quran, like a cloud overcomes them, lights up and down, because of the recitation of the Quran, because that's the sakina. This is something God gives, has been giving, and it's something pre-Muhammad ﷺ. And so, we have then, in the Quran, this story in Surah Al-Baqarah, and it's about the Ark of the Covenant. What is the Ark of the Covenant? Well, that's the Ark in which even our commentators talk about in this tafsir in Surah Al-Baqarah. The classical commentators talk about that. It's the tabut. Right there, right. This word tabut here. This idea of the box. That's the Ark of the Covenant. What's kept in the Ark of the Covenant? Pieces of the Torah, of the Mosaic revelation. Of course, we picture, when we're preaching, Charlton Heston, and Jello, and a mountain, and then carrying these tablets and. Like that, and maybe that's the vision we get. It's I got that when I was going to Bible school, watching TV and movies. But like that. But that's sort of idea. There's a mentioning in the Quran, and that with relationship to it, fihi sakinatun. And the reason the commentators say in it, why is there sakina? Because the sakina has a relationship, according to the Mufassirun, because of the tabut, the box. The Ark of the Covenant. It was a box it carried around. And in the Old Testament, at least, as Muslims, I'm not going to be too hung up about this, but just taking it from them is a little bit, these narratives, I'm not forced to believe them, but just, we do have a similar train of thought here. They carried it around with them, and Aaron went in that space, and then the other priests who came in the priestly tradition, they entered into the tent. They entered the tent, and there was this box designed. The God told them how to build it, and there were the relics of Moses, his staff, and the tablets with the commandments on it. And there, the cloud descended. It was defined in the Old Testament. It's defined as a cloud too, like a cloud. It descends. And he falls prostrate before it, and he prays for the people. And now, for Muhammad's people, it's given to everyone the potential for any of you. You, effectively now, in the new religion, the new dispensation, we then, because we carry pure revelation, uncorrupt, protected revelation, we now become arks of the covenant, each of us, sharing that. And so you see this in the history of the Muslims, the Prophet Muhammad confirming this reality to his companions. That's a powerful thing. I think it's an amazing thing for us to think about. What's amazing is it's not, we don't see it too often these days, do we? What's gone wrong with the vessels of God? Good question. We recite, and the Prophet warns us, people recite the Quran, it will only reach their throat. The beautiful recitation. I'm sure you've all got lots of beautiful DVDs of Quran. You play them in your car like you play background music. You love it. Ooh, you love to hear that stuff. You start weeping and crying. Ooh, I love the Quran. Oh, I love the Quran. You hang it as a DVD, a CD in your rearview mirror. It's spinning around. The Quran, spinning around. Little Kaaba's spinning around. Muhammad's spinning around. Next to your Barbie doll in the car. So it's like being a Catholic with a little Mary bobbing her head in the car. Or a cross hanging in the back. We have little Kaabas and Quran DVD or CDs hanging for some reason. The barakah of it, I suppose. Whatever. What barakah is in that, I'm not quite sure. When did the Quran become art for the sake of just to be mass produced in China? I don't know. It's pretty sad. Anyway, but that's what this is something you should understand. You are a vessel, and your partaking in the prayer is you're being clothed in prophetic qualities and sacredness, and you don't even know this is maybe even taking place. You don't even recognize it. Most of us, if any of us. I'm going to be honest with you. How many of you, even at this point about Sakina, have actually given us a second thought about your prayer in Sakina? Till I'm bringing it up right now. Many of you? Why? Where is the reflection on the Quran these days? Where's the tadabbur, the reflection on the Quran? Subhanallah. I don't know. It's like Hassan Basri said. We know that the Muslims are in the graves and Islam is in the books. This is the hadith. God has vessels among peoples of the earth. The vessels of your Lord are the hearts of His righteous servants. That's the point. At-taqwa ha-huna. Libas al-taqwa. At-taqwa ha-huna. It's right here. And the prayer is about acquiring that. And be careful when the Prophet says here, there's my little, right there. Oh wow, look at this Fatiha. Don't go. It's gone. I'm looking at this, this hadith here, if your prayer doesn't keep you from corruption and, you just increase in distance from God, like the munafiq. The munafiq has the prayer, but he goes to the asfal safli, lowest of the low. What a terrible thing one of the terrible realities of this religion. It's the bitter side of it. The bitter side of the double-edged sword. The one that cuts. There's the sword which comes up, which releases the chains that bind you. The fetters, that's the sword coming up. And then there's the sword that comes down that way. Unfortunately. And of course, in the Fatiha. I don't have time to talk about this. When I first came to Australia a few years back, I gave this 2-day workshop on the Fatiha. I had 18 hours talk time on the Fatiha. 18 hours. And even then I didn't give it its justice. How can you describe the Fatiha? Subhanallah, it's an amazing text. Words that have not been given to any prophet before. The finest, that lay out in clear language for those who reflect. The whole message of the Quran is summed up in these words. You've got to pick them out though. But if I go through a little bit of it, what I want to do, really quickly, is how it sort of starts out. It starts out with that interesting Bab Bismillah. Now, if you say that's a verse of the Quran, you know, some say that Bismillah is the first ayat of Fatiha, and some say it's not. So let's not nitpick about that, Shafi people, okay? But for the sake of argument, let's go ahead and say it is. So I have no problem with that. You know, I'm going to be balanced in my views. But there's that ba beginning everything. It just begins. It starts out with a ba, connecting you. And of course, it says, Abdo Bismillah, I begin in the name of God, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And then of course, if we start with tradition, Alham, gratitude towards God. All things are given back to God in gratitude. And you start going, it's Allah here, and Allah is Rabbul Alameen. And I want to talk a little about the anthropic theory here, but I didn't have time. But when Allah talks about creation as being Alameen, a realm of signs, you know, there's a really good book, it's called The Privileged Planet. What's it? Muhammad, don't you have that book? I have it on DVD even, and the book. The Privileged Planet. You anyone else have that book here? The Privileged Planet? Of course you've got mine, you're my son. You don't count. The Privileged Planet. Buy it and read it. Okay? You can also get the DVD on it. It's called The Privileged Planet. And you'll understand what Naeem was talking about, the idea of Alameen. It's the planet Earth, this planet is a realm of signs for understanding origins. The realm of alamat, signs. And then it's very God, Rahman Rahim, King, Judgment Day. God is other. And all of a sudden it changes, it shifts quickly. Iyaka na'budu. You know, Allah allows you to speak to Him personally, you, not He. Iyahu. We don't say Iyahu. Only Him we worship. Because He up there, you know. Allah, He, Huwa Rahman, Huwa Rahim, Huwa Malik Yawmiddin, He. It's Iyaka. You. We break down the vastness of Allah and His lordship of all creation, and it focuses down where you can speak to Him one-on-one. It's mukhatab. You're speaking to Him as if He's hadr, present. He's present. He's not ghaib. That's huwa. He's absent, gone, third person. That's huwa. No, He's present. He's near. And then, not only that, you're allowed to say ihdinas. You're allowed to speak to Him in a command. Guide us. Of course, it's a request from Allah. It's a desire. It's raja. It's not an amr of compulsion. It's a way of speaking to Allah, and it's even in an interesting way. It doesn't have emphasis. It's very simple. Ihdinas. You know, just guide us. You know, Allah allows you to speak in this simple language to Him. And there's more I could talk about, but that's how it's sort of a quick breakdown. Is that Allah takes this vastness of what He is and wants us to focus in with Him intimately. And you have to bring it to Him. And of course, there are many hadith about the virtues of the Fatiha. And of course, the one very well-known hadith about when you recite the verses, Allah responds to you. This is for my servant. He gets what he asks for. My servant has praised me. My servant has glorified me. My servant has acknowledge me, and then the hadith, and I give him what he wants. And so every ayat is a response from Allah, and the hadith tells us in the hadith Qudsi, Allah is constantly responding back to you. And so this intimacy is brought forth, and so this is what we're doing every day as we recite these words. Take chapter 1, verses 1 through 7 of the Quran, if you didn't know. And of course, from there, we've got to go this quickly. The takbir, you know, the takbirs which are part of the prayer. I'm not going to say much about this, but the first takbir we talked about a little bit in some way. But then, except for places where the prayer there's something actually being said, then what we say then is we constantly are acknowledging Allah's tremendous greatness. And this idea of His kibriya is constantly brought into play within the prayer. But I have to get past this to the bowing, because the bowing is a part of that basic word of ruku. And this idea of the ruku coming from those words of khasha. And it's sort of like this medial thing that we go through of bowing. We're going through this movement. It's taking us from this higher position. And it's a position of recitation. It's a position of divine speech, being listened to and responded to, reflected upon, hearing the commands of God, hearing the prescriptions of God, hearing the narratives of God, reflecting upon them. As Ibn Abbas said, it's more beloved to me to recite Surah Inna anzalna fi laylatul qadr or Wal Asr or something like that than to recite Baqarah quickly. I would rather recite these small surahs with reflection. It's more valuable than reciting a long surah with lots of ayat, because it's the reflection which is important, the tadabbur which is important, not just the long recitation. And of course, reflection is what you're getting it for. We don't want, you don't just out here to get, for every harf, ashra hasanah. You just don't want 10 good deeds for every letter you recite. But that's good, if you're one of these Muslims who are just thinking about the mathematics and the divine economy and breaking it down because you're an accountant, that's pretty sad. You're pretty sad off. Because remember, there's not only in the right hand ledger, there's the left hand ledger. That's because you're getting lots of black on the right hand. That you forget there's a red pen over here ticking it off. And I always say, if you're going to be with people with your those hajis with their click counters, subhanAllah, subhanAllah, 500, subhanAllah, 502. The left hand, ooh, there's a nice looking, ooh, wow, look at that. Ooh, wow. There's always the left hand in this affair. Only God has two right hands, and I don't say that metaphorically. But that's going to complain about Aqidah issues here. The ruku' is that word of khushu', this idea of reverence. And so this idea in the Quran, raka'ah in Arabic is to bow, but also is because it's about a state of humility. And in this state, so we start out with this takbir, Allahu Akbar. That's a statement, Allahu Akbar. We go through recitation, we go through that, and then we're coming to this point of Allahu Akbar, and then we go through in this bowing position. So we're bringing ourselves down from facing God, from facing Allah, to a new movement, to a new state of being. We're going from the point of being caliph, the Khalif of Allah. Why? Because the caliph is the person who is to enforce and bring forth the law of God. And of course the law of God is fundamentally found in the Word of God. So that's the caliph. The caliph comes to receive God's Word, as Allah taught Adam the words, and he's to spread out and to walk on the earth with God's Word. And so we hold up the Quran as we scream these days, getting attention on CNN. But we're now shifting. We're shifting realities too. And so we're going to this new position of ta'zeen. So Subhana Rabbil Azim. And so this idea of, again, transcendence. Transcendence is important. Transcendence is important. This Subhanallah, to say Subhanallah, is one of the most powerful dhikrs you can do. It is one of the most powerful dhikrs you'll ever do in your life. Because when you do the dhikr of Subhanallah, when you're saying, oh Allah, I acknowledge your absolute transcendent nature, your purity, your being free from imperfections, what you're doing is that ihsan, which you're doing, this good, and this truth of God you're acknowledging, He's going to reciprocate with you. And your reciprocation, that which comes back to you, is He's going to start removing from you your imperfections. You become more human. You become less clothed in what we call the akhlaq madmuma, these blameworthy qualities. You start becoming with a new akhlaq, a new creation. And and I can't talk about that time either. And that's part where istiqamah, this verb kama yakumu, and we get the word aqimu salah, and this idea of لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. This idea of kawama. It comes from that verb, kama, to stand up. And it's the idea of a form. And Allah wants to, I want to fall over here and break my neck. There it goes, Bismillah, I'll read the Fatiha and then get up. Move on. Is that Allah is this idea of recreating you. And so when the Prophet ﷺ speaks, that I was raised as a prophet to perfect character traits, it's about being recreated. And prayer is a means of recreating yourself. And it's sort of like, this is a part of it by saying Subhanallah. So but in Uzma, you're still acknowledging Allah in His greatness, but not His highness yet. His greatness. And so this idea of this tremendousness of God has to be constantly acknowledged. Because if you're truly before the Holy of Holy, you're before the Holy of Holy Ones, if you're before the living God, you would be like the high priests were in the time of before Islam. You would fall face down on the ground. Who wouldn't? If mountains break, when Revelation descends on them, and the people of Moses want to see these things and the glory of God, and God says, look at the mountain, and they fall over. SubhanAllah. When somebody having the problem with he would fall on his face. When something happened, he would fall on his face. When the winds picked up, he'd fall on his face. Because even the signs of God in creation, the winds and the rains, are signs of His azma, of His greatness. And that is something which is very heavy. Heavy. You can understand then why animals get upset when there's narrations about Surah Al-Kahf and other surahs. When the Quran is recited, it brings in heaviness. When Muhammad received revelation, he perspired. We know that in the wintertime. And, when companions say, who was it? It was Sa'ad, when the Prophet saw him, his head was on his thigh, and revelation came to the Prophet, and Sa'ad was saying, I thought my leg would break. His head became so heavy. Physically heavier. He felt it. He felt the pressure. This is what's happening. So we bow over, when we begin we begin to, through tasbih, by saying Subhana Rabbil Azim, this idea of tasbih, of Subhanallah, we start acknowledging Allah's transcendent perfection, and then we start then effacing ourselves. Our face is shifted all of a sudden. We're shifting our face, our tawajjuh. Our tawajjuh is leaving. We're shifting our tawajjuh. And we're drawing near. And so then as we do that, God gives us a good sign in this. We just recited words of God. And then we're to say, what? Sami Allahu liman hamida. And this is interesting. This just came out, I wrote this in there, this was a note. And I left it there, Sarah. I told her no, but I'm glad she left it there. Because I knew it was there, and I'm just saying that, but I'm glad it's there because this is what I know. When I wrote this here, I thought, God's confirmation before arrival, similar to the angels asking who was there on the night of Ascension. When the Prophet was going up those degrees towards God, quote unquote, towards the higher realms of the garden, he goes each tabaka, and with Gabriel, and the angels ask, who's with you? He says, it's Muhammad. Has he been asked to come? Yes, he has. And welcome. The gates open, and welcome. And the gates open, welcome. And this is what we're being told here. We start bowing down. We start effacing ourselves before God, turning our face away, and then all of a sudden, as we come up, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Right in the middle of this rak'ah, this cycle, God is letting us know, I'm hearing you. I'm listening. And you're saying it. God's hearing. And that's what the scholars say. When we say this is basically telling you, you should be knowing that God's listening to you. Don't doubt that. Don't doubt that. And of course we say, Rabbana lakal hamd. Minimally that. And what was it the companion said? Hamda kathiran tayyiban barakan fi. And what did the Prophet said? Who said that? Sallallahu said. And he said, no, I didn't. He thought, well, maybe he was in trouble. And he said, I saw 30 odd angels grabbing those words. This is what's happening. And that prayer you're so bored with. Allah Akbar. I start praying. Oh, prayer, prayer. No, I am as my servant thinks I am. If you've got this really bad attitude towards Allah, you can almost guarantee Allah's got a bad attitude towards you. Even in prayer. Now, when I think about these things, I'm like, wow. And it's interesting, one time Aisha, our mother, saw the Prophet praying, and she said, she wondered even if he recited the Fatiha, he prayed so quickly. You see, it's not about whether you did it so slowly or so quickly. It's about were you present before God in that state. And how many stories have you read? All you have to do, friends, is just go with your friends, some brothers, wonderful brothers and sisters who fall into Jama'at Tabligh, get Tablighi Nisab, open up the section of the Fadail Salah, the blessings of the prayer, and read those narrations about those beautiful stories of men, pious men and women in prayer. When Ali is praying and they pull arrows out of his thigh, he doesn't feel the pain. How does that happen? I'm in prayer and I'm scratching here and I'm scratching there, and just watch the live from Mecca and during Ramadan Taraweeh, all those people praying, thousands. it's like, what is that? And in front of the Kaaba itself, how disrespectful. And then there's people laugh at some guy comes from India, he's walking around with a green turban in Medina with his feet off, with his bare feet because he's trying to respect the Prophet. That's a bid'ah. What's respect mean, man? What's respect mean? Subhanallah. Wow. Islah, hey, listen, Allah correct these people. All I can say. What means respect. And then from there, we come to nearness. So I'm a little more animated now. It must have been those cookies I didn't have. This is all those cookie pheromones in the air. The sajda. Subhana Rabbil A'la. And this is weird. Because now, we're doing, now we've been told to face God. We can't, and we're not supposed to turn our faces right or left, right? Right or left, leave the prayer. And now we're turning our face away. So we're taking it partially away. And we bring it back a little bit, and then we lose it. We go down. And we go down, and we go into this strange position. And this is interesting. Because in the surah you memorize, in Surah Ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ said, there it is, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اجعلوها في سجودكم. Say this. That's what we say. He himself spoke about this surah. This is a powerful, he loved this surah. And in Qurtubi, Imam Qurtubi in his tafsir, he talks about the story of how an angel was flying with wings that were, I think, 100 years in wingspan across, and he flew for 500 years. And God said, fly to the flag of the throne. Fly to the leg of the throne. And the angel flew and never reached it. So Allah gave him twice the amount of wings, and he told him to fly even more, and he still couldn't reach it. And the angel said this, and then this is what the angel said. He glorified God. This idea of God's tremendousness. And that's what you do all of a sudden. You go from, and this is what, Subhanallah asra bi abdi layla. This idea of tasbih starts out Surah Isra. Transcendence. And all of a sudden you come to the state of transcendence of Allah being Ala, my Lord, and then what? Your face. Your face is gone. You're no longer there. Because your face is covered. You're taken from this facing of God in recitation to a place where Quran recitation is banned. You don't recite Quran in sajda. There's no qira'ah there. There's only glorification. Pure glorification and effacement. Because your face is gone. That's when servanthood is manifested. You are no longer there. Because the face is also that which you have to guard. It's the face which is giving you away. It's the face which has all those organs which betray you. The harvest of the tongue which puts people in hell. The zina of the eyes. Right? All those things are muted now. With only one thing. Your eyes are muted from the world, in darkness on the ground. Very symbolic of death too. Take a good whiff when you're praying. We don't do that anymore. We don't pray on the Prophet. I told my wife, she was talking about something, and I'm driving in the car yesterday, I said, and the Prophet, one time he prayed, and he prayed in the mud. He was making sajda in the mud, because he had seen that in a dream. Remember that? And my wife said, he prayed in the mud? Because, and she was just responding as a Muslim would do. We can't even think about praying on dirt. It's dirty. What do you mean it's dirty? It's dirt. It's dirty. I need a carpet or something. Like soft yellow Muslims, man. So, the Prophet prostrating on teen, on mud, because that's where he came from. He didn't have a problem with that. He faces himself before Allah. Allah Abdul Shakur. Should I be a grateful servant? We talked about that. SubhanAllah. So this is what you're doing. So you are glorifying God in the state of. So obviously then, Allah Ta'ala says about in Surah Iqra, Surah Alaq, don't be obedient to these people, those people who turn you from God, who interfere people in prayer, etc., etc. Right? And of course this is a sajda ayat, by the way. Waqtarib, prostrate, draw near. And of course the Prophet ﷺ said, not that, 96:19. The closest a servant is to his Lord is while he's prostrating. How odd When you're told to turn away from the Kaaba by no longer facing it. And you come to the state where now, because this is the reality, all the symbols break away all of a sudden. The symbols break away. And so when Muhammad ﷺ has to go beyond the Sidratul Muntaha, beyond Abraham, he goes beyond there, and he goes to a place where even Gabriel can go, where he's lost, where Gabriel can't follow. Right? That's the proximity and the fullness of what it is. We as followers now prostrate, we emulate, we efface ourselves, we cover our faces, and we acknowledge Allah and His transcendent nature. And in that response, in that activity, we are told that we are close to God. And that's when you don't recite Quran, you say your own words. And except for outside, and this is a legal point though, you're allowed to speak to Allah in your own dua. And there are many dua and supplications to supplicate, to speak to God in intimacy. And this is what we have to keep in mind. Allah is bringing us to this. Allah wants us to be in this way. Adam. And I thought this was interesting. You may have some of you seen this. Not this one. But the name of Adam himself is what's written in the Arabic orthography. It's interesting that they're all letters that are not connected. The Aleph is independent, the Dal is independent, and the Mim is independent. And they each represent something of the prayer. The Qiyam, the Ruku, and then the Mim as the Sajda. We go through this cycle. Adam. It's what man is. Adam and man. The original man. This is what defines him. In the orthography, we stand, we bow, we become enwombed. And that's interesting too. That fetal position we get into. This fetal position of the prayer. Like we're in our mother's wombs. And that womb is a symbol of rahmah. We return to that. And we return to that to speak to Allah. Like Jonah in the whale. In darkness. We come in darkness again. And we speak to Allah. Subhana Rabbil A'la. That's what we do as believers. Am I taking too much time? And this idea of so from facing Allah we go to effacing ourselves. Turning that way, we go down, and we cycle through that. And of course it's a cycle, right? It's a rak'ah, because we bring ourselves back up from it. So we go through this, up, and we go through it again. And it's repetitive. You know, the Prophet was a repetitive person. He repeated things a lot. He repeated tasbih, he would say subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah. You know, he said the best act is what? That was small but was done consistently. You continued with it. You repeated it. That's the best thing to do. Right? And many of our great pious Muslims who preceded us, as they were seen post-mortem in dream states, if I only had one more sajda, one more rak'ah, what would I pay for that? What would I give for that? This is the weird stuff I'm bringing up now. Some of this stuff. 7 bones. 70,000 veils. You know, that's all it says there. But then I thought, why the hell do you put the 7 bones? 2 the feet, toes, knees, hands, and then this is the bone. And of course, those are the things that touch the ground. And the Prophet has spoken of there's 7 bones that touch the ground. And this idea of 7, why 7? That's how humans are made, It's what else? That's not. No, I mean, we could have prayed some other way. Gabriel teaches this stuff, right? So, I mean, we could have just stood there in prayer like that and glorified God, right? Or just sat. But we go through this movement, and then he specifies there must be 7 bones that touch the ground. And it's the whole idea of 7. 700, 70,000. And of course, this 70,000 I'm quoting here, some of you would know, is an alleged tradition of the Prophet ﷺ. Well, Imam Ghazali in his Mishkat Anwar, his Niche of the Lights, is one of his more metaphysical works of his, and he has a whole section on the alleged hadith about there are 70,000 veils of light and darkness between a servant and Allah. And this has been something which many of our pious Muslims. Now I know this is an alleged tradition, and I accept that, and that's why I'm telling you it is. I'm not saying the Prophet said that. Ghazali says that, but I would, be critical of the narration. I'd be very cautious of that. But there's a lot of evidence, like Mullah Al-Qadi, for example, in his book on Mawdu'at and his work on forged traditions, this is one of the traditions he says, it may not be really to the Prophet, but there's truth in it. It teaches, there's truth in it. And that's the reason I'm giving it to you. I'm not saying, and that's why this is wallow alam on this one. But to think about that, because I've been thinking about that, like 7. And I know 7 is really important. 7 days of the week. 7 levels of heaven. Sabah samawat wal ard. There are 7 heavens, 7 earths. 7. Of course, 7 could be a lot, it could just mean a many. But this really means 7 here. And so it's an interesting symbolism. Now, if you read works, and if you're like me and you read things that are not just from certain bookstores, I have a little more of a broader scope of things I read, and I read things, that are metaphysical things. I think about that like, interesting, and it's interesting how this goes. We've got 2 feet on the ground, and then and the next 2 come down, and that's 4, and then 2 more come down, and that's how you make sajda. So you're like, you go through this cycle, you fall down, boom, 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 boom. Of course, it looks like that. But you come through, and you bring yourself in, and you go down like that, and then all of a sudden to 7, and then you roll back out. And so you go through this process of going through, from 2, 4, 6, 7, and you bring yourself out. And it's really very simple. You really start seeing a lot of symbolism there in spiritual disciplining. Now, if you think about the idea of the Najd al-Kubra and his works on his writings on the descent of the soul and the ascent of the soul, the concept of ascension of the soul is a really common in Islamic metaphysical works. The idea of the return to the soul, back to an exposure to God, and how the things of our tradition are means of getting us re-exposed to Allah. Not that Allah was ever so like hidden. He's always there, in a sense, to be exposed to, but we're just unaware of him. We're in a state of ghafla. And so these 7 bones, and often there's been traditions about this, where we're talking about, for each of those, there's 10,000 veils, so to say, and then you go through and so you go through 7 stages, and through the 7 points you arrive to the effacement, to the exposure to Allah. And that's why I bring it, just to think about, why is it is it just so important? No, legally it is, There's a legal aspect about these, and if the bones don't touch, if there's not one point where all 7 are on the ground, unless you have an excuse where they couldn't be, a legally sanctioned reason why they couldn't be, the prayer is invalid. So there's an issue about the prayer's validity on a legal perspective, just ritually valid, which we have to consider. But then there's this thing, what does it mean for us to bring 7 bones, and this idea of 7? And that's why I brought this up for us to maybe go home and think about that. Or maybe expand our horizons on some of the things that we do think about when it comes to the rituals that we do. But I think it is significant, but that's all I'm going to say right now, because that's a big old wallow alam on that one right there, and it's messing up. Perhaps it's a cue for us to reflect on. Woo! That was like really psychedelic. Woo! Dizzy looking at that. So this idea of recycling, I like to recycle. I should like a recycle thing. Muslims get recycled. And that's what we're doing. We're recycling until we exit it. And so we go through this, and it's the rak'ah. The rak'ah is the period of turning over. And so the idea of cycles are there. Very important. Cycle of the day. Cycle of the prayer. And it's what we do. And we bring ourselves from states of facing to states of effacement. States of facing, states of effacement. And that's what the believer is. With the believer, you're the Imam Adil who goes out and does things for people. You work for the community. And then you're the worshiper in private, in khalwa, where you weep before God. So the standing, in a sense, is very symbolic of your activity among the people. You're there. And then, of course, we all then move away to our privacy. And the privacy is the sajda, where we get in that private space where there's nothing to be seen. Nothing that we don't see right, we don't see left. While you're in prayer, you're allowed. It's labas to look around like that, right? But when you're in sajda, when you're looking around, you're not looking anywhere. You're not looking right or left. You're just seeing there. And it's usually sort of dark. But that's glorifying Allah in that khalwa, that moment of privacy. And that's what we do as Muslims. We have our outward public face and our hidden face before God. And the prayer brings us to that. And of course there's the tashahhud near the end of the prayer as we wrap it out. And this is it, the big Arabic version of it. And of course, I asked Abdul Murad about this, and it is mentioned that, and where does this come from? And there's the idea of there has been an understanding that this is a part of this discourse on the night of the Mi'raj between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah and overheard by Gabriel. And so, and so this is embedded in our prayer. Not much I want to say about that because that is still something, an alleged incident. But a lot of writers have written about that and expositing the night of Mi'raj and its relationship to the prayer, etc., and the tashahhud. But I don't want to get that. I want to go back to where I was. Click there. There you are. And what's interesting is I'm not going to dwell on this at all. But have we still say As-salamu alayka ayyuhan nabi? We're still saying, as the Prophet taught, as if he was in our presence. As-salamu alayka ayyuhan nabi. Peace be upon you, O Prophet of God. Now, some people there are saying we should change that and say As-salamu ala nabi or something like that. Peace be upon the Prophet. But the companions, even after the Prophet physically passes away from us, he tastes the death his Lord promised him, as Abu Bakr when he said that they didn't change the tashahhud. They kept it as it was, obviously. They were going to tinker with things that some of us would do in the modern age. But As-salamu alayka ayyuhan nabi, this idea of present. And of course we know that our salams are sent to the Prophet and he received by the Prophet and he responds, and Allah himself pours out blessings upon us in saying them. But I'm not going to say much about that, except what I said, because I'm running out of time already. I can see it's already running out. I ran out of time. It's 9 o'clock. Huh? What did you say? I'm going to get the laser on you. I'm not going to put your eyes. I'm not that silly. Your toes, isn't it? My shoes. Just got myself. Here you go. Click. Click. Oh, you just want to talk. You want to be controversial. And of course, then there's after the shahad. And I'm sorry if I'm making that really short for you all. It's a big thing to talk about. Maybe it's a big task to try to do. Is the tashahhud itself. I mean, the salat and the Prophet ﷺ, which are what is important. If I get past here, I don't want to talk. I like that one too. I'm supposed to do that slowly. It's like the expansion of the universe, It's like Big Bang. But what's important is the symbolism of you have to cross from Abraham to get to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is a discussion we could talk about a lot on, I suppose, of friendship, of this idea of being the Khalil of Allah and being the Habib of Allah, the intimate friend and the beloved of Allah. And how the Prophet brings in this relationship between Abraham and himself so much. We know that this is like overcrossed everywhere in the religion. But in the prayer itself, it's there. We know that's on the night of Ascension, and then Abraham's relationship to Bayt al-Ma'mur, and the relationship with Maqam Ibrahim now outside, just next to the Kaaba as we have it today. And then we have to pass through these Abrahamic realities or truths to really have intimacy with Muhammad. Muhammad demands of us to do things that are Abrahamic, like circumcision for men, for example. It's Abrahamic. It's a sunnah that we do, but it's actually something which is Abrahamic. And the prayer itself, we have to acknowledge Abraham in the prayer in order to receive the fullness of the prayer, in as much as we are followers of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I really can't say much more about that right now because I don't have time, unfortunately. But if I could, I would. You come to Auburn sometime on Saturday, you ask me, and I'll explain it to you more. I'll get a book out and read some stuff to you, and you can enjoy it then. Some nice letters on that. And of course, it is all about paradise at the end of the day. It's from paradise, and it ends with the greetings of paradise. And of course, that's what Allah Ta'ala mentions. Those whom the angels gather in death while they are in a state of inner purity, doing this, As-salatu alaykum, udkhulu jannah bima kuntum ta'amalun. And of course, this greeting of salam alaykum is our greeting. We're greeting people, but it's a paradisial greeting. You think it would be like leaving. It's like farewell, because you're leaving this presence of God, but actually you're partaking of something of paradise already, this ritual prayer. There's no ritual prayer in paradise. It comes from paradise, and you partake in it, and so you're greeting angels, and that's what the niyyah is. Okay, if I'm praying, I make the intention to greet the guy next to me. Hello, Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum. This is my friend Muhammad. This is my son Ahmed praying over here. I intend, if I'm staying at the imam's right there, and I'm right here, when I give my salam on the right side, I intend to greet the guy next to me, and I'm greeting the imam, and if it's over here, the same thing, and there's no one present, I'm intending to say assalamu alaikum to the angels, because they're present. But the idea is this paradisial greeting, and that paradisial greeting is a greeting of acceptance. It means you've been accepted. That's what the angels don't say assalamu alaikum to people of hellfire. You know, unfortunately, they don't get assalamu alaikum, they get sticks. Duh! Yeah. So we've got to keep that in mind, and this is important. That's an important symbolism for us. And of course, put that up there. Moon sign. Look for the moon, everyone. Now, there's been some confusion about this in the community, and I just want to give Naeem's. I want to throw my little bit into the confusion. You know, why not? You know, it's a blender, right? Might as well put it on high. It makes a better screeching sound to do that. I mentioned something in this lecture about the religion being simple. Now, I'm not going to beat that down too much. For example, I prayed Friday at a mosque, and you know, it rained Friday. Yesterday it rained a bit, right? And I was at a mosque for Jummah, and it rained. It was like drizzling, and then we heard like this. It was like the rain a little bit, you know. And then after we prayed Jummah, the imam said, they prayed the sunnah, he said, let's pray Asr now. Because it's a sunnah to pray Asr prayer. It's jaiz to pray Asr prayer earlier in a congregation if it's raining. My only question was, does this amount of rain define is what the Prophet was intending? And I would say it probably wasn't. But I wasn't going to argue the point. I just didn't pray. I left when they did it because I didn't think. I mean, you know, this isn't like my understanding of the fiqh of it. But the point was, it creates confusion because I was watching people's faces. Did I do it? Some people are going, some people. Seriously, I was in the mosque, because no one knows that fiqh. They question it. Well, he's doing it. I guess he's the imam, and we better do it. I was like, I don't know how to do it. I've never heard it before. What's that? Well, seriously, that's unfortunate. That's reality. And so, this idea of moon sighting. Well, let's just get down to this. I would say this. The Prophet spoke of things of clarity. Clarity is that you have to sight the moon. No one understands we have a lunar system. No problem about that. We have a lunar-based system. No one's going to question that. When we read on that fundamental point, the question is it's based upon lunar cycles. It's based upon observations, by seeing the ru'ya. The shahr, who sees the month. And that means someone say, of course they debate, what does it mean seeing the month? Does that mean the moon? There'll be all kinds of debate. But let's take the debate down to the fundamentals which we can agree upon. It does require a visualization and a relationship with the moon. The question would be, can you calculate it? If you know it's there but you don't see it, does that count? And that's where the debate comes in. So we have calculations, and those are fixed. They become fixed for us, and those are put on calendars, so we get fixed dates as opposed to visual observations. And I think that one thing to keep in mind about this is that, and I really can't talk about too much, is that at the end of the day, one thing the Prophet made very clear on his farewell sermon was that God has returned time to the way it was. Time has been returned to the way it was. We must honor the months of Allah, and that's not April, May, June, July. It's Muharram and Shawwal and Rajab and Jamal al-Awwal, Jamal al-Thani. Those are the months of Allah. Full stop. The hadith is quite clear on that. The second thing is they're lunar. So we know definitely they're based upon moon cycles. So we can be safe by saying if I observe it, I'm definitely in the right, because that's at least that's the sunnah. No one can argue that the Prophet Muhammad got out and did mathematics and did astronomical calculations and probabilities using algorithms and or using some optical aid. We know he didn't do that. So if you want to be literal about the pure sunnah, as opposed to the weird impure sunnah, I suppose, the pure sunnah would be observe the moon. And then the Prophet says, if you look for the moon on the 29th, if you don't see it because of clouds, the month is automatically 30 days. So the thing is, if you want to be safe and not in shock and doubt, you will observe, look for the moon. If anything else is debatable, not observing. That's not debatable. Because that's the prophetic way. No one can dispute that. You may say, but he lived in the 7th century. Well, we know when he lived. Does that mean we give up prayer or give up other things? Does that mean we give up our timekeeping system? Well, for many of us it may mean that. But I would say you think about it that way. And I could talk more about it. But on the simplest level, you're safer by looking for the moon than anything else because you know that's the way of the Sunnah. And another thing is that we are the last bastion in the world of people of religious tradition who once used the lunar cycle, who've given it up. The Buddhists used it, they've given it up. The Jews used it, and they gave it up. We're the last people, and now we're giving it up. And when we give it up, we forget that it's a sign of God there. To go out and look for it. I'm not saying it's an act of worship. We could debate whether it's an act of worship. But it is about determining something which is sacred with Allah and with God, which are these months. So that's my one point, but I could talk more about it, but I'm not. The other point is, I wanted to quickly mention, our schools of legal thought. Get the book by Abu Bakr Murad and read that. Now, I mean the madhabs. The madhabs are important. When I was first Muslim, I did not follow a madhab. I didn't. Why, man? I'm a man. Abu Hanifa was a man. I could learn some Arabic and figure this stuff out. Why not? Yeah. Well, that worked quite well when I got to Saudi Arabia and seemed pretty okay. And then when I got to Turkey, and I really started reading heavy-duty books and reading about, well, it wasn't as easy as I thought it was. It wasn't like opening up Sahih Bukhari and saying, there was something there, and not knowing anything. Well, it's Sahih, I'll just do it, And we have a man at a mosque where I'm praying at, and whenever the mom prays, someone he says, Rabbana lakal hamd. He shouts out. And I can't figure, I never in my life saw a man do something like that. I'm thinking, where did he get it from? I'm thinking, where did he get this from? I'm thinking, what's he get it from the hadith of the man who did it at the time of the Prophet, that story of the Sahaba. That one-off event. But if you read the fiqh of that, it's makruh. All the schools of thought would say the legal thought on that is makruh. But he's doing it most probably because he's thinking he's doing something that a man did at the time of the Prophet. So I tell him, I'll do it too. One-off events like that do not make a precedent. If you know anything about usul al-fiqh, usul. If you don't have usul, foundations and guidelines, when you approach the Quran and the Sunnah, you will stumble. And I'm just saying this. If you don't believe me, then pick up Abu Bakr Murad's book up there. It's free, right? And read it and weigh the evidences out. No one I've never met a Muslim worth his name being a Muslim or his claim, except that person doesn't want to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. I want to follow the Quran and Sunnah, and you want to follow the Quran and Sunnah. The problem is, how do I follow the Quran and Sunnah between me and the Quran revelation, and the man who is the operational reality of it is 1,400 years and lots of graves? You think it's just about, if you just approach it by text today, textual criticism, you'll end up like the Jews and the Christians. We are not a people of textual criticism. We are a people of living tradition. You take the religion from another person. Books are fine. You'll never be considered a scholar of hadith if you memorize Bukhari without a sanad back to Bukhari. You can go and get a copy of Bukhari from Bukhari bookstore and memorize it. You'll never be considered authoritative in it until you've got a sanad that's proven by chain of transmission to Bukhari that's what you're reciting was actually what he wrote down, even if you memorized it. You understand me? No one will accept it. They'll say, "Why? It's cool you memorize it, but it's worth zero in the tradition." We are a tradition that's handed down generation to generation. You don't take your religion just from internet, from books, from cyborg imams, and so it's probably some kid in Oklahoma who he's a convert. It's a convert. He knows everything, and he's read some book from some place, and now he's an expert. And this is foolishness, and it's deadly, and it's corrupting our religion. The legal schools are there to safeguard you and to keep you in proper means of proper interpretation by many men and women working on it for centuries. And it's a great legacy. Don't overlook it so quickly. Abu Bakr Murad's books out there. Take one if you want. Read it. Enjoy it. If you don't like it, pass it on to someone else who might read it. That's all I can say. Tarawih. Well, 28 rakat. What do we do? True, man. I think it's pretty simple. For the past 1,200 years of Islamic history, it's basically been 20 rakat, except for some people in North Africa, the Malikis mostly. And if you think that Umar made a mistake about that, 20 rakat, when he had Ubay ibn Ka'b, lead the people in 20 rakat prayer. If you're questioning, you can question Abu Bakr and Umar all you want, Radhanu. No problem. He's not a prophet of God, no doubt about that. But definitely, his sunnah is a precedent. And his companions of the Prophet never questioned his position on that, and it's been accepted. If you start questioning him on something like that, how can you trust his companions with the Quran in your hand? Who compiled this Quran for you? Maybe it was a mistake when Umar told Abu Bakr to collect the Quran. Did Muhammad ﷺ hold a book like this in his hand? The answer is no. A bound book? No. You want the Sunnah? You take this book, these words, without tashkilat, without vowel markings, without juz this, no juzzes, no 30 divisions, that's a bid'ah too, by the way. Take that all out, start writing on palm fronds. Palm trees outside, help yourself to the fronds. Start writing. Then you have the Sunnah. A bound book, that's a bid'ah. If you question Omar advising Abu Bakr, the closest man to the Prophet ﷺ, and saying, and Abu Bakr says, he didn't tell us to do that. The man who Aisha said the Prophet was in our house every day, and he never once said to Abu Bakr, hey, by the way, when I'm done, collect the Quran and a book. Then you should not have a book in your hand, by the way. If you can trust him with that, you can't trust him with 20 rakat prayer. That's foolishness. That's stubbornness and it's ignorance. It's not, and it's a lack of history and a lack of reflection. So if you're going to be consistent in rejecting it, then you reject this book in your hand. That's right. That's all I can say. Think about it. Let alone other things. Tesbees, weird-looking turbans, Mercedes-Benzes. We love luxury. But I'm serious, and I take, what more can I say? I can't, we could argue more about it. You can look at all the evidences, but that's the end of the day. People are just stubborn these days. We're a weird generation, a generation of people who like to be different. We like to rebel. That's a very modern thing, rebellion. Muslims never rebelled. Rebellion is a negative thing for Muslims. We don't like to rebel. We like to be submissive. Even in hard times, we're submissive. Revolutionaries are something else. We should be a little more, aware of what's going on, and inshallah Allah will give us awareness. But Ramadan's coming, inshallah Allah's going to bless us in it. I recommend, if you can, 20 rakat with a nice congregation. Some of them are long rakat. Inshallah Allah will give you strength to listen to the Quran. You're not understanding. Inshallah you'll understand it. But many of you will be going like, it's a long juz there, isn't it? Like, Allah Akbar, man. I'm going to go to that other mosque in Auburn where they pray really quick. I'm going to go there. Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar. Thank God. Maybe it's a virtue in many mass numbers of Muslims who don't know Arabic, so they can't deal with the Quran in long recitations, so they like to get it over with. So there's a virtue in it, suppose, easing it for us, mashallah. Then we had those classes, way up there. And, you're more than welcome. Those are going to be coming on next week. We're going to start them. If those of you come to these little talks we have here, if you sort of like this way of approach, then inshallah you can come and we'll talk about Ramadan, and over the Ramadan we'll do different things, and inshallah you're more than welcome to that. And the books outside, if there's any money that's collected, that's going to go to like a chair. It's not that it says donations. It's not for Ihya Center. It's not for me. It's not for anything like that. It's going to go. The money's going to go to some needy family or something like that. So that's what the money's intended for. So the box just happened to look a different way, but that's just because it's the only box we have in hand. So we make do with it. And if I say anything wrong tonight, please forgive me. If it wasn't what you expected, what can I say? We're only human. And we try our best to do what we can. There's a lot more I wanted to say, but inshallah, it was. You can never complain about reading Quran and hearing some hadith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us tawfiq in our lives and benefit us in Ramadan, inshallah. And we make dua for each other, and we keep the fast of the eyes and the fast of the ears and the fast of the tongue, as the Ghazali would remind us. It's not just there's no food in here. Watch where you're putting all your other organs. Don't spend all your evenings at Westfields shopping, and spend your time in solitude with Allah, in khalwa, and making dhikr, reading Quran. Do your work, go to work, get home, spend some quiet time with Allah. Don't eat much don't have a big iftar unless you can help it. Have a little bit to eat, go pray, be light in your prayer, light in your stomach, focus on your prayer, go home and then do what you need to do by eating. But spend time with Allah, get up for tahajjud, don't miss your tahajjud in Ramadan. Look, Laylatul Qadr could be the first night, it could be the 27th of the night, you don't know. Look for it. Look for it. Be diligent. We need diligent, vigilant people these days. We're not that way. We're lazy Muslims. We don't pray very much. We don't make dua very much. We talk a lot. Quit talking. Start crying. We might get a change in ourselves, inshallah. Allah give us tawfiq. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Fatiha. Drive home safely. Allah give you protection in your journeys home.